Okay, Peter, so today I wanted to talk about a development in the boxing industry. This came to me yesterday, actually. I was talking to a friend of mine, a professional boxer, who's had a call from the States to say that two legends are in training, targeting an April date. So we're going to get another sort of nostalgia fest as we had Tyson Jones. And Tyson Jones seems to have been a big catalyst in boxing. You've got to look at the impact that exhibition, that fight, whatever you want to call it, had in November. Because we've got the figures now, and this is the really interesting thing about Tyson Jones. The figures were 1.6 million pay-per-view buys. Okay, to put that in some sort of context, Canelo Golovkin 2 did 1.1 million. Canelo Golovkin 1 did 1.3 million. Tyson, comparable one, Tyson Holyfield 1 did 1.59 million buys. So this was just ahead, Tyson Jones. That makes it the 6th most bought pay-per-view event in boxing history, which was just an exhibition between two old guys in their 50s. So, this seems to have been a big catalyst. Obviously, this was always going to happen in a way if it was successful, which it was undoubtedly. Everybody's looked at it and thought, I want to cash in. So, unfortunately, my friend felt he was unable to tell me who these two legends were. I mean, I'm speculating it might be Morales Barrera. They've been talking about coming out of retirement again. They're in their 40s now. And they've been talking about doing an exhibition at some time this year. And I mean, they had that amazing trilogy of fights between 2000 and 2004. The fight in 2000 and 2004 were both fights of the year. So, and Barrera won that trilogy, or was ahead in that trilogy 2-1. So that could be a very exciting fight. I mean, another development that's interesting is De La Hoya keeps going on about coming back at 47. Unfortunately, De La Hoya, if we're talking about a senior circuit, which, Tyson Jones seems to kick off, and that would be continued with Morales Barrera. And remember, we had the Nigel Benn thing over here, which actually fell through when he was going to fight Psycho Bika, but there was a lot of talk and a lot of excitement about him fighting Nigel Benn. And, Tyson is now talking about fighting Holyfield again. So I think Tyson's definitely going to get out again this year, because he looked so great in that Tyson Jones exhibition. But De La Hoya has been saying that he wants to fight a leading contender. So a little bit out of the senior circuit, which it looks like, was going to be generated. And he's been having words with Golovkin. I mean, he was saying, he criticised Golovkin's last opponent and said, that guy wasn't really up to scratch. I would be a completely different kettle of fish. I'm a much more dangerous fighter. Golovkin kind of shrugged it off and said, look, I don't want to kill someone in the ring, but that's probably what would happen to De La Hoya. So strong words. And De La Hoya ate that up and said, look, you don't know the level you're dealing with. I feel great and all that sort of thing. But that's a bit more concerning. An older guy stepping in with a younger guy. The senior circuit, as it would be, or seems to be developing, is more interesting. I mean, we also in September last year, don't forget, we had another legend out in Julio Cesar Chavez. Julio Cesar Chavez Senior at 58 boxed a 4-round exhibition with George Arce, 41, a 4-weight world champion, for 17 years his junior. But it was a 4-round exhibition with 16-ounce gloves and head guards. And it was a great exhibition. God, it was lively. Chavez was boxing in the same kind of way. And it really lit the place up, that exhibition. Unfortunately, in kind of comparison to his son, who boxed on the same show and put a very lackluster performance in, and was stopped with a cut in round 7. So, it's just interesting to see what's happening with this idea of exhibitions and how they're going to develop it. I mean, exhibitions, as we've said before, Peter, are nothing new. If you go back through boxing history, exhibitions, were very common in the early to mid 20th century, really, and they died out in the late 20th century, I suppose, with the advent of more television, more YouTube and everything else. But if you look at, for example, Jack Johnson, in 1908, Jack Johnson came to London. He was chasing Tommy Burns to box for the world heavyweight title, which he eventually did later in 1908 in Cutters Bay in Australia and won, becoming the first black heavyweight world champion. But when he came to London in 1908, he actually boxed 13 exhibitions in 18 days in London. The idea was to give people a look at him, without the mass media communication that we have now, to let people see, how good he was, how special he was, without engaging in really sort of draining proper fights, as it were. So he was very keen on exhibitions. Incidentally, Jack Johnson's last exhibition, we always put this concern about De La Hoya's 47, Tyson's 54. Jack Johnson's last exhibition was in 1945, at the age of 67. He boxed to raise funds for the Army and Navy Relief Fund. He boxed 3 1-minute rounds with Joe Janay, another great old fighter, and the name escapes me of the other guy that he boxed. But so he was still boxing exhibitions at the age of 67, and nobody thought anything of it. Joe Louis, again, he boxed a lot of exhibitions. Again, everybody wanted to see Joe. He was huge. When he went into the Army, that's all he did. He didn't fight competitively while he was in the Army, but he boxed lots of exhibitions all around the place to raise troop morale. When he retired in 1949, he went on a bit of a sort of mini global tour, and he was away for 5 months, and he boxed 41 exhibitions in those 5 months as his kind of swan song. Just to say, and he obviously got paid for all these and made a lot of money. But so interestingly, exhibitions were very popular. Muhammad Ali did a lot of exhibitions. He used to go, box with his sparring partners, exhibitions just so people could see him. And Muhammad Ali, funnily enough, crossed over because he was such a global superstar. He crossed over his exhibitions into boxing kind of celebrities, people from other sports. He boxed a wrestler in Japan, and that's kind of the model that Floyd Mayweather's taken. Let's not forget, Floyd is still about boxing these so-called exhibitions, and again making loads of money at it. So it did die out towards the end of the 20th century, and I think 2021 is going to be the year when it gets revived, because there's a lot of money out there for these guys. Now, we talked about Tyson Jones at length. We said we thought it was almost the perfect lockdown fight. It was a nostalgia fest. Just as people are listening to older music, they want to see these older fighters. And after what Chavez did, and obviously especially Tyson Jones is the major catalyst, I think 2021 is going to be the year of the senior exhibitions. You're going to see almost a senior circuit developing in boxing. And, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's going to be interesting. We want to get these guys out. I think Tyson Jones showed the way in a way. Whether they're going to wear head guards, whether they wear bigger gloves. But interestingly, I talked about Morales Barrera. They had a fierce rivalry. They were quite different characters, and they had an absolute, sort of real, it seemed like a bit of a hatred for each other, which they took out in the ring. Have since become great friends. So, when they're talking about this exhibition, I kind of feel safe with this exhibition. De La Hoya's route back, he's talking about a proper comeback. That's going to be a bit different. I'd much rather see him, and maybe go in against Hopkins again. Maybe he could do something like that. But like I say, I think 2021, the catalyst of Tyson Jones is shaping up to be the year of senior exhibitions. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this, and get ready for a big announcement coming up about who these two legends that are in training are going to box in Vegas in April, and that's going to be huge, are going to be. Hopefully the next week or two we'll find out. Maybe we'll come back and discuss it then. But, that's an exciting development in boxing. The other exciting development, I was really keen to see something drop in my inbox today. The board are going to resume shows in mid-April. So they suspended shows for January, and I've just had a mail today they're going to resume in mid-April. Resume in mid-February. So hopefully boxing is picking itself up again. It's going to be great. It's going to be a good year. But one of the things you're going to see running in parallel with pro boxing, I think, is the senior exhibition circuit. So let's see how it shapes up. Another development coming in 2021. Cheers, Peter.